All right, welcome to the AdaptX podcast, where we have discussions with people who are building inclusive businesses, advocating for inclusion, or excelling in adaptive sports. Our intention is never to speak on behalf of those with disabilities, but amplify their voice and share their journey with you so you can be inspired and motivated to take on your own. Today I'm joined by Sam Schaefer, an athlete, coach, and an advocate. I'm always hesitant to start these discussions focusing exclusively on the disability because I don't want to imply that it's the main characteristic about the individual, but I think we're going to have a really cool story to share with you today. But maybe we can start before that, maybe your childhood, athletic background, academic experience, career aspirations. So maybe we can start with before your amputation. So where did you grow up? What were you passionate about?
So I grew up just south of St. Louis, Missouri, about a 25-minute drive away from the city. And I was definitely I was a hockey nut, but sports in general. If I were to sum up what I wanted to be, growing up, I wanted to be a pro. If it was hockey season, I wanted to be a hockey player. I wanted to be a baseball player. I wanted to be I kind of played a little bit of, I wouldn't say everything, but I played all the normal sports. I played baseball, soccer, basketball, through grade school, middle school, and in high school, I ended up mostly just focusing on soccer. That didn't end up really going anywhere. But from there, that's whenever I went to college, and I made the decision to join the military after a few semesters. And I realized that was not taking me a direction that I wanted to go. Just felt like every semester was further away from something that I was going to be happy doing. And I had an older brother that was in the military. He had just come back from a deployment. My dad and I drove out to see him as he came back, and there was just this sense of this is where I'm actually supposed to be.
Cool. Awesome. So you enlisted in the military at 19, 20 years old?
Yeah, so I was 19. 19, like I said, I was 3 semesters into college. I did the normal high school right into college. I went to the University of Missouri. And it was fun. It just, like I said, I was just getting this feeling that I wasn't going a direction that I was going to be happy with.
Yeah. And you mentioned in some of the posts that I was reading and stuff that I was reading about you, a specific incident during training that seemed to cause a cascade of symptoms.
Yeah, so I was in the combat control training pipeline, so it's a special operations career field. And we were just on a run. We were running back from the pool. I ended up clipping a curb. And as I land, I land on the outside of my foot. It rolls my ankle so bad. I remember the sensation of my heel touching my ankle. The inside of my heel touched the inside of my ankle. In my infinite wisdom, I got up and continued and finished the run. It was about another mile. And that is what led to complex regional pain syndrome. There was some other more physical injuries. There was a fracture. There was definitely ligament issues. But it led to a nerve condition called complex regional pain syndrome. That injury occurred September 6th of 2011.
And is that diagnosis that's well understood, or did you have any kind of pushback from medical professionals in terms of how they were diagnosing it?
It is not well understood. The name is pretty ambiguous, complex regional pain syndrome. That kind of says it all. Everybody gets it, nobody gets it the exact same. The treatments are very, I don't want to say difficult, but it's just it's almost random on who is successful with treatment and who is not. I was completely treatment resistant. The interesting part is that it typically is pretty challenging to get that diagnosis. I had the unfortunate scenario where I walk in to the clinic. I don't really know what's going on, to be honest. I'm 20 years old. All I'm thinking is, how do I get back to training? I might be 21 at this point. And they start doing some testing, and the woman goes, have you looks like have you already started your med board? Which is a medical discharge, basically. And at this point, I'm thinking I'm getting back into training. And the doctor tells me, he's like, this is the most clear-cut case of complex regional pain syndrome I've ever seen in my whole life. I'm really sorry. At this point, I hadn't even entertained the idea that this was going to force my removal from the program, much less the military.
Yeah, so when you're kind of first met with that news, probably not knowing much about CRPS in general, what was the next step? PT, OT?
Yeah, so like they had me in physical therapy, and part of why I got sent to that doctor was they had me doing ankle sprain physical therapy for like 6 months straight, and then accused me of lying when I said that my pain was where it was. I was like, no, I don't want to be here. I want to get back to training. I was like, I'm not here because I think it's a good time. And finally, somebody just was like, you know what? Maybe what if he's not lying? Like, unfortunately, that was the culture. I had to prove that I wasn't lying about the pain that I was in, and they sent me and they did these tests, and they were just like, yeah, sorry.
We've heard that from like a couple other guests that had these complex conditions that are a little more ambiguous, and it just seems so bizarre to me. Like, why would someone who's highly motivated, who really is passionate about what they want to do, like, I guess relegate themselves to just like therapy? Like, why would anyone lie about that?
Yeah, it's like it's not like the paycheck's that good. Like, like we did the mistake of figuring out our per hour one time, and we shouldn't have done that. That was depressing.
So you were discharged from the military, and did you find another passion, or kind of how did your career proceed from there?
Yeah, so I was very fortunately, I was introduced to CrossFit in February of 2010. This is just before it started to like really get the big momentum. When I first started CrossFit, there wasn't a shoe for it. Everybody had like 4 pairs of shoes in their bags. They didn't quite know what to go with. And I mean, you had people running in Vibram 5 fingers, you know, all these like wild things. So we're just trying stuff. And so I remember thinking before I left, I was like, man, when I get out, I bet I'd like to coach this. This would probably be a fun thing to coach. So I kind of kept learning about it, and I kept, you know, that had piqued my interest very early. And from there, and then when I got discharged, that's what I went back to. My discharge took a long time. Like I said, I was 6 months into the injury whenever I got diagnosed. It was 15 months after my accident that I actually got discharged. There was a couple people that didn't want to do it for some reason. I don't know, whatever their personal stuff was. And so I got into there. I used part of my severance check to pay for my CrossFit level 1. And I began that process. And within a year, I was coaching CrossFit or CrossFit style classes wherever I could, just starting to get that experience. Still really with a very poor understanding of what was actually upcoming for me. You know, I'm still now only a couple years into this, what became a 9-year journey. I didn't really understand. I was young enough that I was definitely in denial. I was just trying to like desperately cling for everything I could to get, because I got told you'll never lift again. You can't be an operator. You can't be you're no use in the Air Force. You will never run again. You will not, you know, you can't play soccer. You can't, like, that's all I got. I got this huge list of can't evers. And I'm just sitting there like, I can't, like, it hurts when I do nothing. I'm going to go do this thing I enjoy because it's still going to hurt. And through that, I started to learn that strength was an asset, that if I trained my function well enough, that even though that function was deteriorating, if I could continue to raise the level of what 100% was, if I was only going to get 20% that day, well, I'd rather 20% of a bigger set of capacities than 20% of a smaller capacity. Yeah. So it kind of became that journey. And again, some of it was very hard-headed. Go figure, a 23, 24-year-old single guy who's just like desperate to be like, who wants to get back to life, was a little hard-headed in that pursuit. But like, that's kind of where all that started. And then, like I said, diving into the coaching realm, learning. And that was what I've done as a profession actually ever since. That I was coaching for years with CRPS, some of that time on a cane and on a forearm crutch. And then when I got back to walking, I went back to coaching.
Yeah, I saw in one of your posts you said something along the lines of that walking makes the pain worse, but not more so than losing your fitness. So it's like, yes. I mean, we all have, I guess, like, challenges, whether you're able-bodied, adaptive, etc. And I know some of our clients that are in like a rehabilitative state, maybe post-stroke or post-injury, like sometimes get frustrated at the work they have to put in. But, and I don't mean to demean that in any way, but at the same time, I'm like, I have to work to maintain my fitness. So like our goals, like the goalpost might always be moving, but that doesn't mean you should stop, I guess, moving towards it. But I think like your stuff with CrossFit, was it ever hard to convince clients of kind of your expertise if you're coaching with like a visible physical assistance like your cane? Did anyone ever question your kind of authority in that regard?
I had been coaching in that same room for so many years before the cane became necessary that I actually felt it more than they did. They knew my expertise. I had been working and helping these people for years. Some of them over 5 years of coaching and helping them helping them progress. That like it was more in my head than it was anywhere else. Like I assumed that I was going to get pushback and feedback. And I never did, at least not to my face. I never did. Yeah. No one ever said, well, I don't want to go to his class because of. Mm-hmm. Everyone's like, because like I was always, I still do, I'm still doing classes and courses and learning things like, and that was partly what I was known for is that like Sam is still learning. Sam is still working on building. He knows a lot and he worked and everybody knew how hard I worked at my coaching. Yeah. I have said over and over, I am 10 times the coach that I am the athlete, and most of my athletics are just simple R&D for my coaching. Yeah, absolutely. And that's still the case.
I mean, I think some of the information that I came across that you had shared on training strategies for amputees is definitely the best that I've seen. Haven't seen a ton of solid resources, but even like the way that you describe like equal weight distribution between feet, like all that stuff band underneath the prosthetic to improve that, like those cueing and those external cues and the strategies and the modifications, I think are second to none for that space. But so you started CrossFit 11, 12 years ago, adaptive division, adaptive CrossFit probably wasn't really a thing. Obviously it's gained a lot more steam in the recent years. But were there any other like adaptive athletes? Were you even considering yourself an adaptive athlete at that time?
Nope, was completely unfamiliar with the term. I didn't know that I fit into that category as somebody with CRPS.
Yeah.
I didn't like it was because like it's an invisible injury, so nobody came and talked to me about it. Yeah. So like I was like completely unaware that any of that existed until my amputation. I had done a little bit so once I knew that I was for sure pursuing amputation, I reached out to a local organization called DASA, and they had a sled hockey program. And so I started playing sled hockey because that allowed me to get one. I didn't realize that I actually did qualify for because that's when I learned that I actually already was an adaptive athlete by classification with CRPS. But I was going into that room with the idea of like I can spend time with amputees and learn from amputees about what that means. Like, because like you said, there really aren't a lot of resources. Like that's part of been my motivation for putting out the information that I'm doing is very simply like, this is what I Googled and couldn't find when I was going through the process a few years ago.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting timeline because when I was kind of looking back at your stuff and trying to read about you, I saw sled hockey stuff before your amputation. And then so that was kind of an interesting perspective. Like, were you working towards amputation? Like, did you have that in your mind and you were like, I want to kind of build up the skills now beforehand?
Yeah. So I knew that that's the direction I was pursuing. I got a lot of resistance from the VA. I fought with the VA for 9 months to get my amputation. So that was also the window where I started playing sled hockey. Again, part of it was to get acclimated to the environment. And like, again, I wanted to learn everything I could. I was like, I had this unique opportunity to begin life as an amputee on purpose.
Yeah.
To begin that chapter not as an accident. And I was like, I don't know, dumb is the wrong word, but what a poor use of my time and resources if I don't go out and try to actually gain some perspective and understand everything I can before it happens.
Yeah. What was the pushback from the VA, or what's the hesitation?
They just didn't want to do it. Like, she was like, well, this seems, I don't know, I'm uncomfortable with this. And I'm like, well, I'm uncomfortable with this.
Yeah, you're like,
they're like, you're perfectly healthy. I was like, I am not perfectly healthy. I was like, I'm in massive pain. I haven't slept in 9 years. like they know all this stuff, but like, there wasn't a way to treat. Like, I had failed pretty well every treatment, in the first 18 months. And whenever I got out and I was at the VA, in the VA system, most of the treatments to try were we had already tried and seen no success with.
yeah,
So I got asked if I wanted Vicodin permanently, and I expressed concerns with that. I was like, I don't think that that's a wise strategy. I was like, we know how that story goes. You give me opiates, I develop a habit. I either keep getting more opiates, or you become or you get into heroin. That is like the story. Like, there's so many vets with that story. And I expressed that concern. I was like, I don't think this is a good strategy. And they look me dead in the eye and go, oh, so the pain must not be that bad.
Yeah, that's crazy resistance.
so like that was the start of my relationship with the VA in 2012, 2013, and it never really recovered. Like, there was that and there was just not really anything to do, and I wasn't going to go ask for help, and all they were going to say was, well, which pill do you want? Yeah. Which I was like, again, there's no end in sight. I didn't know that amputation was even an option for a long time. Yeah. And so, like, we didn't have a good relationship, or we didn't have a relationship, I should say. So when I came to seek out amputation, there was like, well, I had someone tell me, you haven't even tried to get better yet. And I've done nothing but bust my butt for 8 years at this point, gone through like more pain than I ever I could fathom. And it was kept getting worse. Like, I had to be like, if I couldn't squat 400 pounds at a time, my walking really got bad. Like, I had to be that strong just to function.
Yeah, that's another interesting thing. I think, well, as in response to coming the beginning of that conversation, not that CRPS isn't a disability, but we do hear from some of our guests in terms of like how much their life improved after their disability. So if we consider amputation like your main physical disability, not that CRPS wasn't, but like people talking about how much better their life gets after their disability. So in your case, there's really no comparison.
No, not even close. Like, they saw amputation as a failure, and I saw getting out of pain as a success.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was willing to throw any punch that I could throw for that success.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's hard now that like you have a visible disability. I think people are prone to like pity that, but in your regard, it's like the best thing that could have happened to you.
The best thing I've ever done for myself, the best gift I ever could have given myself, my wife, and the rest of the world.
Yeah.
The version of me that was in massive pain couldn't get anything done. Couldn't talk, I couldn't express myself. Like, I was just so blocked up from just so much pain. And now I've got this opportunity to free up. Like, my brain's got all this like space to operate. And like, it was a really wild experience getting out of pain, especially those first few months. It was a really wild scenario.
Did you experience any like phantom limb pain or any residual discomfort after the amputation?
I did, yeah. Nothing crazy. Especially like in the first month, some bad days and some good days. But I was fortunate that with my amputation, my surgeon also did work on my nerves with a procedure called targeted muscle reinnervation, or TMR. If you are somebody seeking an elective amputation, or you have this opportunity that your amputation's happening on purpose, that absolutely should be a part of your procedure. And it did a lot to mitigate phantom pains to the point that I really don't have them anymore. Every once in a while, and I can almost always tie it to my left glute. I lost my left foot. My left glute gets really tight. I will get some of that phantom pain. But other than that, it's very, very minimal at this point.
Are you above the knee or below the knee?
Below.
Below the knee. You mentioned squatting 400 like while you had CRPS and kind of having a high level of fitness. Did you talk to anyone that had experience with kind of using fitness and exercise to manage CRPS symptoms? Like, do you think anything you did exacerbated symptoms or improved symptoms?
I never found resources to talk to. Part of it was I didn't seek it out like aggressively. The few times that I did try to like kind of look into support groups or information type stuff, it really wasn't my jam. I found a lot of people leaning into how bad it was versus what can you do? And that mindset, and what I learned from that was with CRPS, you have to stay on the gas. Like, you have to, the second you stop, I never saw anybody get back on the bike. You had to keep pedaling. And so that's what I learned from that. And so it became a big trial and error. So like I started off, I was doing CrossFit. And as the condition progressed and worsened, running became an issue. Jumping rope, and bigger impact. And then it became simply coming off of a pull-up bar could mean 3 weeks of exacerbated pain if I landed on my left foot at all. So then it became like increased like prolonged heart rate, like intensity, again, all the things that kind of CrossFit works into with like longer pieces. Then the duration became an issue. So I had to learn how to assess. And I learned a lot about assessment in that process. And so like, okay, that's gone. And I had to drop the ego. Yeah, I really want to do it like everyone else, but I can't. Mm-hmm. Or if I do, I'm going to trade that 1 hour of doing things like everybody else, and I'm going to be absolutely miserable the other 23 hours of the day and be capable of getting nothing else done and being a useless human being because I'm in so much pain. Yeah. So then that's where the dive into like strength became more of a thing. It started with the natural move was to go to Olympic weightlifting. I was like, okay, I like the fact that it's still very technical, very skill based. Because when I had my feet planted and together, I was moving bilaterally. I wasn't having near as much stuff getting flared up. It was unilateral. Like walking was harder than deadlifting. And then, I still had deteriorations. We had to change up how I squatted at times. I had to be ready I had to have a plan A, B, and C for if my leg was going to not cooperate with the program squatting or pulling or whatever it was. So Olympic weightlifting, I kind of put a focus on that for a while, learned a lot. Things became too inconsistent to be able to stack any real training together. I moved on to more just flat out strength biased. I got into throwing. That was kind of a middle finger to the condition. That wasn't really about trying to get better, I think. I was like, you know what? I really want to give this a try, and I think I'm running out of time. I truly believed I was running out of time to be able to try things and figure it out because, again, I still didn't know that amputation was an option. So I thought I was just done. And so, continuing to learn, I was like, okay, so I've never dived very hard into rotation. So that was a big piece of that one. Trying out different methods. Odd objects became like way more valuable than barbells. Just different things like that so I became a very good scientist. Yeah. I became very good at running every bit of training as an experiment.
Yeah. And I think that like some of the best learning experiences that I have been my own trial and error. So I like your experience having to modify everything for kind of symptoms that are always ever changing probably made you such a better coach. And maybe like obviously your clients might not have CRPS, but there's no way that there's not similarities in terms of how they respond to different exercises and how you can kind of make those modifications on the fly. So I always tell people like when we're introducing them to working with people with disabilities, like training adaptive athletes makes you a better coach for all populations. And I think there's way more similarities than differences.
Absolutely. Everything that works for me works better for able-bodied. Yeah. That's the funny part. Yeah. Just to find something that works is like works here for me, works all the way up here for able-bodied because you get to get all the benefits. Yeah, exactly. I learned a lot about modification. I learned a lot about how to relate with an athlete when things aren't working right. strategies on how to work better. Like, yeah, I picked up there was so much that I learned, and like also teaching them how to be a more present athlete. Like, the word gets thrown a lot. Oh, be present gets thrown around a lot. But like one of the things that I really learned was how to be very aware mid lift, how to actually feel my hamstrings, feel foot pressure, and be aware of it in the middle of a dynamic lift. And then I was able to then transfer that. And then I realized how valuable that was. And I started learning how to teach other athletes to do it. And then go figure, set their game on fire.
Yeah. So that, and then combined with probably when some of your physical ability to demonstrate movement is taken away, I would imagine that makes you a much better verbal communicator, because you don't have the same luxury of like me demonstrating how to do a squat. You have to succinctly outline the 3 or 4 coaching points you want to communicate, and it makes you a much better verbal instructor as well.
Absolutely. And that's where I started developing. That's where I really got good at developing drills. That's where that little band drill you were referencing, that came before my amputation. Yeah, absolutely.
After your amputation, maybe, or I guess, when did you have your amputation? It was a year and a half ago.
August 26th of 2020.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, so a few years back. Okay.
So, yeah, I'm 3 years post amputation, not quite 3 years with the leg.
Okay. So that was in the middle of COVID, huh?
Yeah, it was whenever the operating room started to open back up a little bit more freely.
Okay. All right, cool. And over these last few years, what have been like the sports that you've gravitated towards? Have you competed in adaptive CrossFit?
Yeah, so I've done a little bit. I've done the CrossFit Open a couple times. I did the very first one for the adaptive. I mean, I had been doing the CrossFit Open probably 5 or 6 years before my amputation. So yeah, I have done CrossFit. I was actually on the first all adaptive team to qualify for and compete in a major CrossFit competition, the able-bodied division. 2 other amputees invited me to come down to Miami, and we did Wadapalooza in the able-bodied division, which was just a ton of fun and a really like impactful thing. We got to have a lot of good conversations. We got to build a lot of fans for the adaptive division. Like, people were coming and talking to us afterwards because like they got to see us compete next to a fitness level that they understood. Their friends were out there, so they knew how fit their friends were. And now we're not just like a feel good. We're like, oh no, these guys are actually fails. Like, yeah, you should go check this out. And we'd go tell them when the next event was, and we'd go and we'd see some of these same people there, and we'd go watch the events with them. And we got to do stuff like that. So I've done CrossFit. I've done a few Highland games. I've got back into throwing. In May, I threw a game where there's 8 world records for adaptive Highland games in each adaptive division. I broke 5 of them in the same game. That was pretty cool experience. Like I said, I played some sled hockey. Schedule's currently not permitting for that one right now. Unfortunately, hockey is like the lifelong passion for me. Like, I don't remember becoming a hockey fan. I just always was. But this winter, the plan is to get into more stand-up skating, and I've already been invited to a couple of beer league teams. So if that ever needs to be tickled, I've got a place to go there. That's pretty cool. Trying to think what else. I've really gotten into a good little bit. Right now,
do you feel like you would gravitate towards standing hockey as opposed to sled hockey now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For what reason?
I like using my legs.
Yeah.
I'm big by sled hockey standards. If you watch like the national team, it's a lot of double amputees. It's shorter sleds. They're more maneuverable. Not that I can't get it done, and I had a ton of fun with it. I just love the idea of getting out there and getting my legs going. I still have them, so it's like I've always kind of wanted to do it. I've never really gotten to play. I was a really undersized kid growing up, and I was also in a big family, and hockey is not a big family sport, so never got to like play growing up. So why not? Mm-hmm. I learned to skateboard. I learned to skateboard on a prosthetic for the first time in my life. So
yeah, all good examples of how life has improved significantly after your amputation. Yeah. Just the opportunities that's provided. I wanted to ask about just like how you perceive adaptive sports versus something like standing hockey. So I get you kind of said that you like to use your legs, but it was just one of the things that kind of came to mind as I was prepping for this is, and you have the unique perspective of kind of having played both and having the capacity to play both. And I often wonder if like introducing quote unquote adaptive sports to able-bodied individuals would kind of make the prevalence of them greater and kind of make the popularity of them greater. So I'm just always interested in how like kind of adaptive sports can exist more in the mainstream.
So I think a lot of it is really simply an education process. You can see a lot of it on the women's side as well. I would say like the women's side of a lot of sports are a little bit ahead of the adaptive side, but we're going through the same process. And what we're fighting is how established able-bodied sports are. But so the way I put it here is I was really fortunate. When I first went into a sled hockey locker room, in that locker room was the goalie for Team USA, who recently became the first ever Paralympic athlete to be inducted into the U.S. Olympic Hall of Fame, and then the captain of Team USA, who is a double above knee congenital amputee, and Josh Pauls, Steve Cash being the goalie. That was who I was in a locker room day one. I realized really quick that if Josh had been born with both his shin bones, he still would have been an Olympic athlete. Same caliber of athlete. He just happens to have a disability. The expression is what changes. Like if I hit the same level of proficiency on a movement or in a sport as somebody who's able-bodied, the expression is going to look a little different. Like if you want to just put it into like weightlifting terms, where that may be that level of proficiency, skill, strength, let's just say all that being equal, might be a 300-pound lift for you. That might only be a 250-pound lift for me. It's understanding that it's understanding that language. It's kind of like watching it in a different language. So again, it's a lot of education. It's also, there's the unique opportunity in 2023 where we've all got social media. I've got a 4K camera in my pocket. It's people putting themselves out there, like, being out there and like being willing to be that educator. And one of the guys on the U.S. sled hockey team that's gained a lot of popularity is Jack Wallace. And he's done a ton on like TikTok where here's something to learn about sled hockey today. And that sort of stuff does go well. And then from that, and then it's also tempering expectations. People think that because adaptive athletes aren't making the same money as LeBron James that we're being discriminated. Like, no, it's just got to build a little bit. Like these structures have to build, and understanding that we are planting a tree we may not get to sit in the shade for. And I'm good with that. Like I'm doing these things, I was supposed to I was supposed to box on Saturday. I was supposed to have a fight. Fell through. Had 8 opponents back out and elect not to fight me, unfortunately. But like part of it was like I want to demonstrate that this stuff can be done well.
Did they back out because of your amputation?
I wasn't told that was actually the reason, but I was told that they didn't want to they didn't want to take that L. Is what it is. It'll happen. It'll happen eventually because it was able-bodied opponents.
Yeah.
And but like part of that, it wasn't because I wanted to. Yes, I do want to fight and I want that experience, but like it also became an opportunity to like demonstrate, like, no, this can be done well. And here, I'll show you how. Like we need a lot, like in the adaptive space, we need a lot of those people because it's not me who's going to get paid, but there's a kid that may see that and start working on his boxing now and turns into a great freaking boxer.
Yeah. Because
he saw that.
Yeah, you talk about it as like, I like the lens of representation instead of like inspiration. It's one thing that I've asked some of the guests that we've talked with, like, do you like being considered an inspiration, or do you kind of prefer people express that differently to you?
I would say I kind of struggled with it a little bit early on. I don't love going to Aldi's and having some older woman grab my shoulder and tell me how amazing it is that I'm out getting groceries by myself. come on, man. Like, I can do more than you can.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. That's just like that's just the education piece. I think like people
yeah.
don't
So
know
like,
what to say, so they just default to what they think is like the nicest thing to say, but they don't really
exactly right.
realize.
So it's like I've kind of moved towards. I'm pretty neutral on it because I kind of had this like moment of clarity with it because there was like a point where it was like it was bothering me a little bit because I was like I felt like I was being patronized a little bit, and I was like, you know what? The reality is inspiration is derived from wherever you are currently. Who am I to take that away from somebody who feels maybe a little lower about themselves or they're just not as far on their journey and they look forward and they see like, okay, this is very doable. That's inspiring to me. Who am I to rain on that? Like, why would I want to get in the way of that? The world is a better place if more people are doing more things that are more physical. They have more belief in themselves. The world's a better place for that. I'm not going to be a jerk to somebody who says that I'm an inspiration to them.
Yeah.
I don't get excited about it. I don't seek it. I don't need it. If I never hear it again, that's fine. But like, cool. Like I'm glad you found me then. Like I am glad you found my page. You got questions? Ask them. Let's go.
Yeah, yeah. It's like you want to inspire action, not just compliments. It's like you want to inspire someone to like get after it, like because of what they say you do.
That's a way better way to say it than I did.
No, I thought yours was very eloquent.
Action. I want to inspire action. No, I love that. Like,
yeah. So you've recently kind of picked up running. You have your hands in a lot of different buckets for sports. Oh, I also wanted to ask, like, have you tried amputee soccer?
not like on a field, like not in a game. I have a pair of crutches that I've taken out and kicked the ball around a couple times.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah, a friend of mine's the captain for the U.S. team. So, and I know they're always looking for people. So, him and I were talking this morning. We're hoping to have a training camp next October, actually, in the Boston area. So,
Oh, cool. I recently went up to Boston this year for the very first time, and if New Hampshire isn't my favorite place on earth, I don't know what is.
I like the like New Hampshire vibe a lot better than the city vibe for sure. We're about an hour outside of Boston where my gym is here, so definitely not city like. More New Hampshire vibes than Boston vibes.
Okay, then yeah, I need to link you up with Les Leg then.
Are they in Boston?
New Hampshire.
Okay.
Tina Hurley's in.
I follow Tina on Facebook. I think we're friends on Facebook. Yeah. So there's also. Are you familiar with Noelle Lambert's Born to Run Foundation?
I'm not familiar with the foundation. I know who she is.
Yeah.
I can proudly say I followed her before she was on Survivor.
yeah. She's pretty local to me here, and I know they've been gifting running blades to various people. Yeah. So you got your first running blade recently, a couple years back
To Boston.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I trip to Boston earlier this year.
What was that first experience like? Kind of getting out to run.
It was weird. I felt real heavy. So for perspective, I think I was around 175 whenever I got hurt. I was 195, like a solid 195 going around. I was like, oh man, I feel real heavy because I hadn't bounded like that in years, like years and years and years. And it was the first time running in like 12. And, yeah, but like my brain caught on to it. I understood the mechanics because again, like you said, I couldn't like show people how to run. So I had to get really good at the understanding and verbalizing how to run with the athletes I was coaching. So I was able to then get to apply that and like learn that over a couple of days. Because I understood how to cue it. So now I just had to do it to myself. And like, that's where all the work, all the whole process came to this like huge culmination of like, oh, you can express this now. Yeah. And that was very cool.
Are you using your running blade in CrossFit as well? Is it a better option for that type of training?
So I'm not really doing CrossFit right now. But I would not, because it would be like equivalent of doing these movements off the ball of your feet. Okay. If I were to be getting back into that, I'd probably be doing something more like the hybrid foot, like the Cheetah Explorer from Oser, where it's got a heel. That's probably a little bit more. Or honestly, I'm using the Forever Foot from Levitate, and that thing is sweet.
Yeah, for people who don't have much knowledge of prosthetics, would you be able to kind of succinctly break down the difference between like your everyday leg and like your running blade?
Okay. So trying to be as succinct as possible for this incredibly complicated
Yeah,
case.
I know. That's what's a little tricky.
So we can oversimplify it and put most prosthetics into two categories: absorbing energy or expressing energy. So like a running blade is expressing a lot of energy. It does not do a lot of, it does almost no absorption. It's all about the return, and that springiness gives you that feel of running. And then like that's not typically what you want to walk around in every day. So your walk around feet, they've got less return, they're a little softer, they've got more again, there's more energy absorption happening and less return. It's a lot more comfortable to walk around. Like I said, if I were to walk around on my running blade all day, my hip would be jacked up. It would feel terrible to walk. It'd be like walking around on my tippy toe. There's a reason that, because optimal running happens on the front of the half of the foot, your running blades only have the front half. And now what I was describing is a foot that that actually lives in the middle of that. So I would be able to get some more of that movement. I'd be able to pull, like again, put it in the CrossFit setting. If I were going to do some like lifts and stuff like that, a lot of your barbell lifts are flat foot lifts. So because I'd have that heel on that specific foot, I'd be able to get some of that propulsion, not as much as a running blade, but some of it, while still having the balance that comes from leaning towards that everyday foot style.
Yeah, that makes all perfect sense. And what is since you seem to be the one that's always after specific tangible goals, do you have a specific running goal?
Find its logical conclusion. So I've signed up for a 30K in May. I'm going to be running the Bryce Canyon 30K trail run. Good bit of climbing. It's going to be, it's not technically ultra distance, but my understanding is that it's an excellent introduction to ultra running. So I know that like I'm running for experience. I'm not running because I want to run. Now I've really learned some stuff through this running journey already. Like my boxing footwork has improved as my running improves, like my technique, my boxing improves. And that's been awesome because you get hit less. The better your footwork is, the less you get hit. So there's that side of it. I really want to see how far I need to take it to really start to maximize or optimize that. Like what's the best like return on investment there. And then like for me, like I want an experience. Like I'm not trying to like not. I'm sure I'll run a marathon at some point because the 30K is 19 miles in tough terrain. I would assume if I could do that one, I could probably then turn around and run 26 on flat paved road. Not the same, but similar capacities.
Yeah.
But like I want the experience. Like I want to see things. Like even just some of the runs I've done already. I've done some trails. I've done some just like really nicely well taken care of paved runs even. And I'm just like, I love this experience that I'm getting. And this is not the same as walking. And it sure as heck isn't the same as watching on someone else's social media. So like, I want to see what sort of experiences are out there for me.
Is the uneven terrain of trails tough for the foot?
You know what? I have had less challenge than I expected. The other thing is it's super precise. So that prosthetic isn't as big with the running blade. It's actually a lot smaller. And I was like, oh, that's actually, if my vestibular system is in good shape, it's a minor, not an advantage, but like it's not a hindrance at all. Like I've yet to find an issue, and I've not gone anything crazy technical. But I've had no issues. It's been really fun. I would say you don't start on trails though as an amputee. You really have to have that gait pattern figured out. You have to have there's a way bigger strength prerequisite to run on a running blade than it is just to run able-bodied. Now able-bodied running probably has the same thing, but on the blade you have to be stronger so you can control the blade and not get controlled by it.
How did you get affiliated with Tina's organization there?
She found me on Instagram, actually. So I got a message from Less Leg More Heart, and she was like, "Hey, I took a look at we've been watching your social media for a little bit. we think that I think that we align on some goals. Would you be willing to get on a Zoom call? And so we hop on this call. It was immediate. We clicked right away, and she's exactly right. We're both about making everything accessible. So they work with a prosthetic manufacturer called Levitate, and they gift those running blades. I didn't know this. I was actually being interviewed to be a recipient that day as well, and so they ended up flying me out to Boston. I did some media stuff and content stuff for Less Leg More Heart, and then we went down to the D1 facility in Boston, and we Levitate puts on these events called test runs. So like, hey, if you sign up, you're an amputee, we will put you in a running blade, and you will have the option to test one out. We're going to teach you a little bit about how to use it. And, they do these events to spread awareness, and because Levitate's big thing is accessibility of these running blades as well. I'm sure you're aware of how difficult it is for a lot of amputees to gain one.
Yeah.
Levitate sells theirs direct to consumer instead, and they sell them for $2,000. You get a payment plan for under $200 a month. The blade gets shipped right away. So again, we're all three of us are on the same page. I was gifted a Levitate running blade, and kind of the rest of the story wrote itself. Being a coach for as long as I had, and I was just kind of working on it, and they were like, I got put on the spot, like, hey Sam Schaefer, where you at? And this is I had spoken and met the owner of Levitate on a Zoom call about 6 weeks prior, and he puts me on the spot. He's like, hey, why don't you come and teach us, warm us up and teach these guys? It's like, all right, let's figure this out. And we figured out that I know how to get amputees. I ran the same sort of drill concepts that I was doing for myself, and we had 30 amputees with a quality running gait within 20 minutes to include a handful of AKs. And it was incredible. It was like this crazy, holy cow. Now what happens if I get time to actually really refine this process?
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds like it would be a great clinic to bring to other organizations for sure.
Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned one of your values that aligned well with Less Leg More Heart was making fitness or sport accessible. What do you think needs to be done in the fitness space to make it more inclusive and accessible?
From the able-bodied perspective, these athletes cannot be seen as the boogeyman. They can't be seen as this really difficult to work with. And then from the adaptive side, from the athlete side, we got to understand that these people are learning. They're not going to have it all figured out. And there needs to be a little bit of grace with that as well. There's a lot of people that are trying very hard, but they're not there yet. So if you got to understand the reality of the scenarios that we're walking in. People haven't been studying amputee squatting, deadlifting, running for decades the way they have able-bodied. They're still learning how to translate all that stuff. And there's very few people like myself that had almost a decade of that sort of coaching and learning and then became an amputee. So that's where I feel a responsibility to be putting out the content that I am now. Because again, that makes it more accessible. It's great for amputees, but I've had able-bodied coaches that have passion. I want to serve this community. I just don't know how.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I think I've written a little bit about that where I think sometimes what holds businesses back is just the fear of not being able to accommodate for someone. So they don't even promote themselves, or they don't even make the effort to be more inclusive, because at some point they're going to run into a condition that they're not familiar with, or they're going to run into a scenario where they're not sure what to do. So to hear from an athlete like yourself, where you're kind of giving someone like myself the grace to kind of figure out what the best solution is together, I think that's an important message to communicate and maybe put more people at ease. We're not expected to have all the answers. We're just expected to care to find the solutions. So I hope that's a message that would resonate with some people that might be a little hesitant to enter this world, but that are needed to kind of make the industry as a whole more accessible.
It's funny. Yeah. I've seen some very qualified coaches that I think would kill it in the adaptive space. They're afraid to do it for that reason.
Yeah.
And then you see people that just flat out oh, my cousin was an amputee, so I'm passionate about this. And they don't do any education, but they tell people all about how much they care. And now they're out there. I'm like, oh no, you're not. Oh, this isn't helping. Oh no. I'm trying to find that line. It's It's hard. Like, yeah, that's the other thing is understand that it is challenging, like to get the stuff figured out. Like we're trying to figure out how to do something and use an inanimate object as a tool. Like it's a challenging task. And like, again, yeah, it's so much perspective. Again, it's perspective, grace, and like, let's figure it out together. Let's be committed to this quality. And that's the thing I think that is missing a little bit is there's not enough people that are committed to the quality of what's happening with these athletes. They think, oh, that their job is to be their cheerleader. No, like just because that bar got off the ground and they stood up does not make it a good deadlift.
Yeah.
And your job is not to say great job. Your job is to be like, all right, here's how we do it better.
Yeah, we talk about how like to be a good adaptive strength and conditioning coach, you have to be a good strength and conditioning coach for all populations first. So then you can kind of apply those principles. Like you said, like, you knew the gait, you knew running gait, and then you were able to apply that to an amputee. But if you had just immediately gone to like, oh, I'm very interested in helping people post amputation learn how to run, but you didn't do that due diligence of learning gait mechanics and learning biomechanics of running beforehand, it's like you're just a cheerleader, and that could be a good thing, but we do need to kind of raise the standard, I guess, a little bit in terms of how adaptive athletes are trained.
Yeah, exactly. And it's teaching methods as well. It's not just flat out knowing what running gait mechanics are. It's how do you develop them? The teaching side of it, like you have to be a great teacher for this.
Yeah. Well, we're very interested in following along as you prep for that 30K. Is it next spring? This coming spring?
Yep. Yeah. I've still got a lot of time.
Yeah.
enough time for me to get a little too overconfident and zealous and think, no, maybe we'll do a 50.
that tends to be how it goes. If a marathon's good, an ultra marathon must be better. I tell people that all the time. I got clients, they run their first 5K and they're like, so now I'm thinking of signing up for a marathon, and I'm like, more is not always better. Like, and people that run marathons aren't inherently better than people that run 5Ks. It's like,
correct. I'm running a 5K this weekend with my wife.
There you go. If people are interested in learning more about you or kind of finding you on social, where's the best place to do so?
All right, two places. The best one to go to is definitely my Instagram. That's what I've been doing the longest. At Sam Schaefer 1, SAMSCHAEFER, and then the number 1 on Instagram. I know there's about 96 ways to spell Schaefer, and they all make sense.
I'll link it in the show notes so people can go right there.
Appreciate that. And then I am early on in my YouTube career, where I'm trying to put out a combination. I'm going to be doing all my run prep, all my stuff, everything that I learned for this 30K. I'm going to be going in depth on my YouTube channel. So there's going to be like a recurring vlog. So I'm going to be discussing just running as a whole, what I'm learning on the amputee side, but more than anything, I want to communicate the process of figuring things out, because my process isn't going to be the same as yours, or my absolutes aren't going to be the same as yours, but that you can mirror the process to figure out your version of it. And that's my goal at the end of this, is someone's going to learn how to figure it out. I'm also tying that in with some amputee specific education stuff. We talked about that video the other day. Started a series that just got started called The Concept of Cue and a Strategy, where I'm going to take a concept of a common movement or movement pattern. I'm going to tell you exactly how I've been successful cueing it to a prosthetic, and then a strategy for you to take it home and know whether or not you're getting it right.
Yeah. So those will all be amazing resources. I love following along with people's training on YouTube. A couple like my favorite triathletes and marathoners that are very open with their training. For some reason, it's just like I love watching that process. So very much looking forward to following along with yours as well. Sam, I'm glad we connected. I appreciate the time that you gave me this morning to touch base, and feel very fortunate to kind of have you in our community now, and appreciate you being a part of it.
Yeah, thank you. It's the pleasure's all mine, and I'm hoping we can figure out some more stuff to do together.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to the AdaptX podcast. Our effort to amplify the ideas of our guests and create more inclusive and accessible industries is futile unless these episodes reach a larger audience. If you enjoyed our discussion today, please leave us a rating or a review on whichever platform you use. And if you would like to learn more about AdaptX, the course that we teach to health and fitness professionals and the projects that our organization is working on, you can subscribe to our newsletter through our website, www.adaptx.org. Until next Monday.